big heart.
She was the most compassionate, caring, captivating person I've ever met. She was in a very good place in her life.
Murdered in a terrifying attack.
Somebody set the body on fire and left. Her last few minutes of life was pure hell.
Detectives discover a secret affair.
They had started to develop more of a relationship.
We told him straight up, you're the killer, and we're going to have your DNA.
Then uncover a surprising suspect hunting for prey.
The night that she was murdered, she had answered a call.
There was a note. The directions were to a fictitious place.
He was trying to trick young women.
A second tragedy sparks terror in the community.
We may be dealing with a serial killer.
I lived in fear. I was terrified to go out at night.
Before a calculating killer is ultimately revealed.
This is not real. This can't be happening. This is crazy.
Just 90 minutes from the bright lights of Nashville, Tullahoma, Tennessee is a quaint city full of Southern charm.
Tullahoma is a very small town. Everybody knows everybody. Your teachers at the high school are the same teachers that taught your grandparents. The community is very close-knit.
The people there are genuine. It's a safe place to live. We don't have a lot of violent crime.
In the early morning of July 2nd, 2012, a grisly crime is discovered that sets the whole town on edge.
I got the call that a couple of younger people were driving down a very, very rural road and they seen a fire. They were going to put the fire out, but when they went over there, they noticed that it was a body that was on fire and called 911. When I arrived at the scene, several other investigators were there and said, this is real bad. It appeared that foul play was involved. We wasn't sure that she was murdered at this spot. It appeared that somebody may have just pulled over or backed up, dumped the body, set the body on fire, and left.
There were some tire tracks. We couldn't plaster or cast them because they were in gravel. I just kind of surveyed what we had. There was no evidentiary value. Where do we go from here?
First responders extinguish the fire, and investigators take a closer look at the scene.
As what this actually was.
It's just like something you would see off of a movie. This is not real. This can't be happening. This is crazy. The victim was a young white female, possibly in her 20s.
There was star tattoos behind each one of her ears.
And there was a magnolia leaf tattoo. I remember she had a shirt on. It had something to do with the nursing technical school. She was undressed from the waist down. Body was partially burned and covered in soot. The fire was relegated to her pelvic area.
It led us to believe that there had been a sexual assault. Someone had obviously tried to burn the evidence up.
Her body was already in rigor. I would believe that she was deceased at the time of the fire.
What was very glaring was blunt force trauma to her head.
You could actually feel the broken bones in the skull.
Detectives immediately attempt to identify the young victim.
There was no purse, no cell phone, no license, no vehicle to help us identify who the victim was.
Investigators speak to the couple who made the 911 call.
They didn't know who the person was. They didn't see or hear anyone. It was obvious almost immediately. They didn't have anything to do with this homicide. It was very traumatic for them. They just couldn't believe it.
At the scene, I made the suggestion to put what information we had on social media to help us identify her.
Within a few short hours, local mother of four, Kelly Sharpton, sees the missing persons report posted online.
Mom was at work, and there was a post about a young girl that had been found. When she came across the section that said she had star tattoos, I was told that Mom screamed out in the middle of her office. And then, of course, she called the sheriff's office.
She introduced herself, and we started talking, and the description seemed similar. The tattoos seemed to match.
Kelly instantly heads down to the police station for a formal interview.
When we interviewed Kelly, she was distraught. She was crying, and she identified the body in Todd's office on pictures. The victim was her daughter, Megan Sharpton.
I walked in, and I immediately heard my mom sobbing. And I can still hear her to this day. She just said somebody killed her last night. And it took me a second to figure out what she had just said. And then it hit me that she was...
4-year-old Megan Sharpton was a bright young woman with a big heart.
She was genuine. She was the most compassionate, caring, captivating person I've ever met. She and I were really, really, really close. She had the best laugh. She was so fun.
I could count on Megan to do anything for me. I knew she was always there. She was absolutely hilarious, very bold, but at the same time, you could tell she didn't want to be the center of attention.
Regardless of who you were, where you were from, she didn't care. She really, truly cared for every single person.
Megan had decided to turn her caring nature into a career.
She was working herself, through nursing school. Megan would have been an amazing nurse. She had her head on straight and was, ready to get going with her career.
Along with her calling, Megan had also found love.
She lived with her boyfriend, Chris. They were together 3 to 4 years. They had the same, group of friends.
She was in a very good place in her life. She had lots of goals to go on to those next levels in school and her career. Megan was about 2 months away from graduation. She was very excited about it. Never in a million years did I think that somebody would kill her.
Investigators start piecing together a timeline of Megan's last known movements.
I spoke to her that Sunday afternoon. It was about 4 or 5. We would go to Mom's on Sunday and visit and have dinner and just kind of hang out as a family.
But that Sunday was different. Megan said she would be skipping dinner as she had a last-minute job interview.
She said that she would head to Mom's at some point.
But Megan never showed up.
Later on that night, she wasn't there. It wasn't a concern for us. We all thought, okay, well, something else must have come up. She was on her own time, and we'll see her sometime tomorrow.
Tragically, it would only be a matter of hours before Megan is discovered dead and on fire.
I was very much in shock that day. It didn't sink in that somebody killed her. It was just very, very hard to process.
In the interview, Carrie and Megan's mom told us what kind of car she drives. We put a bolo out for that car.
When investigators ask who could have been responsible for Megan's death, her sister doesn't hesitate.
I said, Chris did it. Megan's boyfriend asked me, why do you think Chris did it? I thought, Chris and Megan had an up and down relationship. They were like oil and water. They would be hot-headed and tempered at times.
Majority of the time that a female is killed in the United States, it's someone that knew her. As quick as we could, we want to talk to him.
He is a very hot suspect.
Coming up, police learn Megan's love life is more complicated than it first appears.
Another person had actually been in a relationship with Megan.
Did a dangerous love triangle lead to Megan's death?
When someone is murdered like that, it's got to be a jilted lover.
She had intended to leave him. That would be an absolute motive for murder.
Just when detectives believe they have an airtight case, a new piece of evidence changes everything.
I saw the video, surveillance of that person.
It caught my attention big time.
Never would I have thought it would wind up like this.
Detectives investigating the vicious murder of 24-year-old Megan Sharpton in Tullahoma, Tennessee, have their first suspect, her 25-year-old boyfriend, Chris Farrell.
Chris and Megan, to me, had an off and on relationship. They were both very hot-headed at times. And there were bumps in their relationship.
Once Megan and Chris got together, they were inseparable, but towards the end of Megan's life, the relationship had started growing apart at that point.
As far as Chris is concerned, it was just the only person that was with her on a daily basis. That was the only thing that made sense.
As detectives prepare to bring in Chris for questioning, a fresh lead comes in.
The Bedford County Sheriff's Office had located her car. So I had picked up and rushed to where the car was found at.
The car was sitting out in a rural area between Tullahoma and Shelbyville, Tennessee, approximately 15 to 20 miles away from the crime scene where Megan was found.
This is an odd place, odd way to leave a car. The car was, that of any young person's. It was cluttery, but there was none of her personal effects.
Investigators do find one item that grabs their attention.
There was a note in the vehicle, a girl's handwriting where Megan was going.
It was directions on how to get to an address.
The next thing was to find this address, but there was no address that fit the note.
The directions were to a fictitious place.
In talking to her mother, I learned that she had left to go to this job was this intent of doing harm to her. The way this thing was shaping up is that she was abducted where her car was found. She was killed somewhere else and was found on Awalt Road.
We just sealed that car off and sent it on to the crime lab for DNA testing.
Investigators then head to Megan's apartment to talk to her boyfriend, Chris.
The boyfriend was the first person we looked at. He was distraught. On the night of the murder, Chris had told us that he had left for work, and she had told him before he left she had accepted a job by phone that a girl she had went to school with recommended her for this job, and that she would return in the morning. And in fact, she didn't return, and he became worried, and he had reached out to her mother.
Following up on what Megan's sister Carrie had told them, detectives asked Chris if he and Megan had been having any problems.
Chris described him and Megan's relationship as a good relationship, that they had their ups and downs like anybody else, but that he would never hurt Megan.
Detectives are suspicious he might be hiding something. Why else would Megan's sister point the finger at him so readily? They asked Chris to come down to the station for further questioning.
We interviewed Chris, and he was visibly shaken.
When pressed about his relationship with Megan, Chris changes his story.
He was quite honest. He said, that they didn't have the best relationship, that, it'd been somewhat strained. He felt like that maybe she wanted him to have a better job or maybe be more career-orientated.
Megan was getting ready to graduate college and start her career, and I don't think Chris was there at that point in his life. He was still, wanted to be young.
Chris swears he had nothing to do with Megan's death.
Chris's alibi was that he was at work at a local department store where the majority of the night he's going to be on or near some sort of camera.
Chris tells police he left for work at 5 p.m. and was there past midnight. But until his alibi can be confirmed and Megan's time of death is determined, he remains on the suspect list.
From my interview with Chris, I learned that there was another person that lived in the house, Robbie Rosar.
Robbie was one of Chris's friends. He moved in there at the end. My first thought was Robbie hurt Megan. I'd never met in my life that I know, nothing about other than what Megan told me. He was a little rough around the edges, but Megan loved everyone.
I reached out that day and I asked him to come in. Robbie was a different person. Robbie was a little darker, a little less happy person.
Investigators ask Robbie point blank where he was when Megan was murdered.
All night, even to the morning, worried about her.
He said, "Look, I'm not the killer. I want y'all to find out who killed Megan." And he was very, very adamant.
He wanted to prove his innocence, which was a good indication for me that he didn't do this.
But when detectives ask Robbie about the nature of their relationship, his answer leaves them stunned.
Robbie told me that he had actually been in a relationship with Megan, that they were in fact lovers, and that she had intended to leave Chris. It was a shocker
Megan had told me a few weeks before her murder that her and Robbie had started to develop more of a relationship versus just friends.
Like Chris knew about Robbie, that would be an absolute motive for murder.
And so, again, that's when we thought, did Chris do this? You know, if things got crazy and tensions got high and emotions ran high, this would be a motive for homicide.
A day after 24-year-old Megan Sharpton was violently killed, detectives suspect jealousy could have motivated her murder. Megan was having an affair, but did her boyfriend Chris know?
When someone is murdered like that, you always think it's got to be someone close to her. It's got to be like a jilted lover.
We brought Chris back in the interview room after speaking with Robbie, and we kind of dropped that bombshell on him just to see his reaction.
It turns out Chris did not know about the relationship. Chris was upset. He was visibly upset when he found out that Megan had had relations with Rob, but he maintained that he still loved her and that he'd never hurt her. Chris was sincere, and I believe that was true.
Both of them individually took polygraphs. The questions asked were very pointed. You know, did you cause Megan's death? They were very straight up. They both passed.
When Chris and Rob's polygraph came in, it moved them down on the list of suspects. You can't really take them off the list of suspects. They're just simply too close to the victim. But it did move them down.
Putting Chris and Robbie on the back burner, detectives turned to the job offer Megan received the night she was killed. Could that have been connected to her death?
After the polygraph, I started mulling over Chris's interview and the original nuggets that he had given me about the job. He had told us that he thought that it had come in from a girl she went to school with previously. He had said that I only remember her name is Naomi.
Investigators searched through school records and discovered Megan had a classmate named Naomi Jones.
It was going to be very important at this job, possibly led to her death. I went to Naomi's residence. I knocked on the door. Nobody there. I drug out my lawn chair and I sat in the front and I'm going to wait. I'm going to get this statement today. The neighbor kept looking over there like, who is this crazy guy? And I was like, I need to talk to Naomi Jones. He knew the Joneses well enough to have called her. When talking to Naomi, I said, I'm Todd Hyman. I'm with the Franklin County Sheriff's Office. I'm investigating the death of Megan Sharpton.
Naomi stated that, she knew Megan. They wasn't close.
She went to school with the year before in nursing school. I learned that they rode to clinicals maybe once together, and she offered up the fact that her husband had drove them. Further talking to her, I learned that she didn't really like Megan for whatever reason. She was very to the point and said, I wouldn't recommend that girl anything.
Naomi says she has no knowledge of Megan's job offer or her death. While investigators consider their next move, the autopsy report comes in, and it contains a surprising detail.
The cause of death was a gunshot wound to the face and blunt force trauma. She was burned, so the soot had kind of hid the wound.
Megan was shot with the medical examiner's office believes to be a .22 caliber round.
Her skull was broken into several pieces. It's very possible she was hit with a pistol and shot with a pistol.
The autopsy revealed she was deceased at the time of the fire.
She was purposefully burned in an attempt to hide evidence.
The autopsy indicates the fire was set shortly before Megan's body was discovered at 1:18 a.m. on July 2nd. Her time of death was likely before midnight.
Her last moments alive were pretty terrifying.
The report also confirms what police suspected at the scene.
The doctor that performed the autopsy said that there was a presence of sexual assault. There was DNA present. I started feeling like there could be a resolution more quickly with that piece of evidence.
The DNA is rushed to the crime lab for analysis. Then, 2 days after Megan's death, detectives get another possible lead.
July the 4th, there was a guy in the creek fishing who found Megan's purse along with her driver's license, social security card. We never did find her cell phone.
Megan's cell is still missing, but investigators order her phone records, hoping they might point to her killer. As the days start to pass by, Megan's family becomes anxious for answers.
10 days for any information leading to the killer of Meg's case.
Many in town begin to wonder if Megan's murder is connected to another high-profile investigation.
It was the same time frame as the Holly Bobo case that was going on. It was a whodunit, just as ours. It was in Darden, Tennessee, which wasn't too far from here. And, immediately some citizens would ask me, do you think there's any connection?
As detectives compare both cases, they have a chilling realization.
Holly Bobo was a nursing student also. She was abducted from her home. I don't believe her body had been recovered. We obviously had to look at the parallels. Was it a nursing student serial killer?
It's another leading it somewhere to go. You've got a killer running around. Who is he going to kill next?
Weeks after Megan Sharpton was murdered, investigators are searching for a link to the unsolved disappearance of another nursing student in a nearby town a year earlier.
The Holly Bobo case became of interest to us, and our investigators reached out to theirs. There was concern that we may be dealing with a serial killer.
While detectives from both cases work together to establish a link, rumors sweep through the community.
I was terrified to go out at night. I didn't like going places I wasn't familiar with, and I lived in fear almost of just everyone.
With Megan's killer still at large, the sense of loss begins to overwhelm her family.
I was really hoping that it would be solved pretty quickly because it was consuming Mom minute by minute. I could feel her emptiness when Megan passed away. She was never the same again.
It absolutely became a mission. I know if it had been my child, I would want somebody to have went that extra mile, to work that extra hour, to find the resolution to what had happened.
Finally, 3 weeks into the investigation, police get the results from the forensic search of Megan's vehicle.
It came back with no evidence. Didn't find anything that shouldn't have been there. There was nothing of value found.
Detectives hope tests on the DNA found inside Megan's body will yield better results. Her approximate time of death was before midnight, so investigators circle back to her boyfriend's alibi.
He said he was working at the time that happened.
Chris was working as a cashier on the evening shift. We go back and pull the video. He was in the store when Megan had been killed.
A lead that sends the investigation in a new direction.
The original phone call about this job opportunity came into an older phone that Megan had.
Chris is able to locate the phone and shows it to detectives.
He was able to go back and find a number that he believed had called proposing this job.
When investigators run the phone number, they get a surprising result.
It was what we refer to as a burner phone.
The burner phone, the fake address, and the suspicious job opportunity all add up to what detectives suspected early on.
She was going to a fake job interview.
So, if we could track that phone down, we could get to very possibly who the perpetrator was.
Because burner phones don't require a registered name, the number doesn't lead to anyone.
So I was able to at least track the phone being sold at the department store here, and I called their loss prevention person. I was like, well, can you pull every one of these sales that was done?
There was like 11 or 12 burner phones purchased. We pulled video.
We started looking at the mails and questionable ones, and just, who looks like the most suspect person in these pictures.
One of the people paid for their phone, that burner phone, but they had their cell phone out on the camera. And just the demeanor and that just really caught Todd's attention.
It caught my attention big time. He's already got a cell phone. He's buying this burner phone for a reason. We were able to use the video from the department store to follow him from the purchase, out the door, into the parking lot, almost off camera. We saw him approach a red pickup truck. Why would you park that far out unless you were trying to avoid detection? I take the pictures of this guy and I circulate it to other departments. Within minutes, I had an identification of who this was. This guy's name was Timothy Gifford.
Timmy Gifford is a local drug dealer, not the most honest person around.
I put the word out that I need to find Mr. Gifford. I felt like he was our guy or he was involved.
Officers soon track Timmy down and bring him to the station.
We sent him down the interview room. I show him, the picture of him buying the phone.
We told him straight up, you're the killer, and we're going to have your DNA. And Timmy was, he was stressed out.
He was like, I'll tell you everything I know. I didn't do this. It wasn't me.
Timmy says he doesn't know Megan and denies speaking to her. When challenged about the burner phone, he tells police he bought it a month before the murder for...
Donnie Jones was a police informant.
Donnie'd been a bad boy for a long time. He had a very long rap sheet, thefts and drugs.
Donnie Jones had served time before, and he had been accused of rape before. That right there was a real turn in investigation.
At first, detectives struggled to see how someone like Donnie could even be connected to Megan.
We found out that Donnie was married to Naomi Jones. That was another nugget that was very interesting.
Detectives had already talked to Naomi earlier in the investigation. She told police she did know Megan, but she had never recommended her for a job.
Naomi was somebody that Megan went to school with. They would carpool with each other occasionally. And we found out that Naomi's husband, Donnie Jones, would drive them if the weather was bad. Naomi's connected to a male with a criminal history, and he knew Megan Sharpton. There was a lot of aha moments in this case, but we're going somewhere. We've got something here.
Three weeks after the murder of Megan Sharpton, detectives are interviewing Timmy Gifford. He tells police he bought the burner phone for Donnie Jones and divulges important details about the red truck seen in the surveillance footage.
Timmy Gifford said that the truck was Donnie's and that a few days after the murder, he had replaced all the interior. And I was like, ooh, that's probably my murder vehicle right there.
The carpet has been replaced. It's been completely detailed. That is a clue that you may be on the right track.
Timmy also tells police Donnie traded the truck to his brother a week after the murder.
Everything is pointing towards Donnie Jones. As quick as we could, we got the search warrant, and we took the truck directly to the TBI crime lab.
Investigators have zeroed in on Donnie as a suspect and quickly pay him a visit.
In his initial statement to me, it was something to the effect of, I hardly know that girl.
I ain't never had no contact.
But you knew of her?
Yeah, I did know of her. I don't know much about her. I knew of her.
When's the last time you talked to Megan?
I ain't never talked to her. No, I take it back. When my old lady was going to school, one day they both needed to ride.
Donnie is adamant he had nothing to do with Megan's death.
His alibi was he was home with the kids.
I'm with my kids all the time. That's all I do. I got a 9-month-old and 7-year-old twin.
Without some concrete show to somebody.
Detectives confront Donnie with Timmy's claims.
This guy said he gave me this phone, and this is the last number to call her when she's alive.
He said he gave a phone to me? Yeah. He ain't gave me no phone.
I have nothing to hide. Y'all search my house. Y'all put in the house.
We searched the house. We didn't come up with a lot of evidence. There was very little to be found.
Donnie also consents to provide a DNA sample. While they wait on the results, detectives get their forensics back on the red truck.
The truck had been cleaned, almost sanitized. Even the interior parts that I gathered off the search warrant, they didn't come back with any evidentiary value.
Megan's family is briefed on the new developments.
I saw the video, surveillance of that person purchasing the burner cell phone. I saw somebody that none of us knew, that had no association to Megan whatsoever. Todd had a name of the person who that burner cell phone was purchased for, and I just kind of shrugged my shoulders, like, okay, who is this guy? Nothing made any sense to me.
4 weeks after Megan's murder, the crime lab sends investigators the results of the analysis on the DNA from Megan's autopsy.
We got a DNA hit.
And the hit come back, and it's Donnie Frank Jones.
A supervisor of mine called Donnie up. He's like, hey, I need to meet with you.
Donnie comes down to the station where detectives confront him.
I said, did you and Megan Sharpton ever date? No. Did you and Megan Sharpton ever just hook up, one night stand, party or something? No. Were you and Megan Sharpton during this date, the date of the homicide? No. And then Todd asked, why would your DNA be inside of her? And it was just, his face went, he just couldn't believe it.
He got very, very, very irate, mad. After he had a moment, Donnie said, I just had sex with her.
However, his initial statement of he had never been around her other than that one time kind of put him in a corner.
Detectives don't buy Donnie's story, but they'll need something more concrete to press charges.
All we can prove right now is he had sex with her.
That was a concern of the district attorney, is that, a consensual relationship could have left that evidence behind.
Investigators have no choice but to let Donnie...
Complete disbelief. It was infuriating that he said it was consensual, and so he was allowed to walk free as they put the pieces together.
Hoping to prove who was with Megan when she was murdered, detectives run a detailed search on 4 phones: Megan's, Donnie's, Timmy's, and the burner.
We asked for cell phone GPS analysis. They can take some technical data and plot it out on a map and show you to some certainty an area where a phone call was made. We're in kind of a waiting pattern, hoping for phone records for the silver bullet to kind of put this thing away.
The cell phone analysis will take weeks, but investigators get a chance to get Donnie off the streets when they discover a rifle in the trunk of his car.
Donnie's a convicted felon. A convicted felon cannot possess firearms.
Even though the rifle is determined not to be the murder weapon, it's enough to arrest Donnie. Now detectives must establish if he killed Megan Sharpton.
We got him in custody. We had the DNA, but at the same time, we needed more. We need as much as we possibly could get.
It's all theoretical until you can prove he murdered her.
4 months after Megan's murder, investigators receive the detailed phone data and find a clear link between Megan and her killer.
And I was just ecstatic. Hell yeah.
I met with Kelly, and I told her in person, I know who killed your dog.
Four months after the savage murder of Megan Sharpton, detectives have used cell phone GPS data to prove who killed the 24-year-old nursing student.
That's Donnie Jones.
On the night of the murder, the burner phone, I will refer to it as the murder phone, and Donnie's phone, they were in or about the same location. Timmy's phone is not involved. The murder phone and Megan's phone are talking to one another. And the cell phone records will show they were coming in contact with one another, and then they both stopped where her car was found. And I think at that time is when she was abducted. Using the cell phone data, we was able to show that at first that Donnie was close to the place where we believe she was abducted at. Then that he was close to the place I believe that he killed her at, and then that he was close to where the body was found.
Donnie's family owns several farms in that area, and that's where we felt like that she was murdered.
They gave us permission
investigators make a telling discovery.
There was a burn barrel there that caught my eye. I found a purple scarf with black stars on it. It was later identified by her sister Carrie as a gift that she had given Megan. I went from an absolute whodunit to this guy might have done it to, oh, this guy definitely done it.
The overwhelming evidence is what made the DA take that step to indict him.
I was elated. I went to the Coffee County Sheriff's Department and had him brought up, and I arrested him.
On November 5th, 2012, Donnie Jones is charged with first-degree murder, rape, and 2 counts of aggravated kidnapping.
One attorney, that was it. He had no more to say.
Never would I have thought it would wind up like this. When Donnie was charged, Mom, she was still pretty overwhelmed, but it was a relief to start learning that we were going to get the details of what events led up to that day.
Based on the evidence collected, investigators pieced together how Donnie lured and then murdered Megan. It paints a disturbing picture of a calculating predator.
So while looking into the murder phone, we started backtracking all the numbers that it had called. And there was a pattern. Everyone that was called with that phone was someone that was sitting with the elderly or doing some kind of nursing in-home service. The murder phone was used just seeking out a victim. Donnie had reached out to Megan. He knew well enough to go in his wife's phone and get her number out, and that's how all this started.
She had known Donnie and his wife. They're not close friends, but knew him. She answered that call from Donnie.
Megan was on her way to a job that didn't exist. The directions she had got were not good. She had to call our suspect.
He met her, at which time he abducted her and went back to one of the family's farms.
Megan Sharpson's last few minutes of life was pure hell and panic and fear.
He raped her and shot her. Megan was beaten prior to being killed. He moved her from there to where he set her body on fire to try to hide his crimes. And then he went home and acted like nothing happened.
Donnie Jones is just a cold-blooded killer. Sexual deviant, cold-blooded killer.
7 months after Megan's murder, Donnie Jones pleads guilty, and on February 4th, 2013, he's sentenced to life without parole.
I feel he's a monster. There is no reasonable explanation why he did it.
There was a sense of accomplishment that we moved so fast in finding out who killed her. Had we not have caught him, he would have reoffended.
Detectives do determine Megan's murder was not connected to the Holly Bobo case.
There was 4 people arrested in the Holly Bobo case. It had nothing to do with my case.
If Megan hadn't lost her life, I feel very confident that Donnie Jones would still be out, trying to trick young women. Megan put him behind bars for life. She sacrificed her life to keep everybody else in our community safe.
Despite getting justice for Megan, the Sharpton family suffers another tragedy just 9 months later in November 2013.
Mom took her life 16 months after Megan's death. Her heart was just incredibly broken, and she made the choice. She wanted to be with Megan.
Yeah, he essentially killed them both. Sure did.
Our family time, that's when I missed her the most. I missed that laugh. If you just heard Meg's laugh, you would be having a much better day. I miss those specific moments, those milestones that she's not going to get to be a part of.
I thought Megan and I would be friends for, on into adulthood. We were supposed to be together forever, as best friends, as sidekicks. She was not someone you could forget. There was a memorial placed on the side of the road where she was found, and it's this beautiful giant star sculpture. It's very cool, and Megan would absolutely love it.
She answered that call from Donnie.
Megan was on her way to a job that didn't exist. The directions she had got were not good. She had to call her suspect.
He met her, at which time he abducted her and went back to one of the family's farms.
Megan charged the last July with criminal acts. Shorty. Megan was the trying to hide his crimes. Donnie Jones is just nobody killer. Sexual danger, nobody killer. 7 months after Megan's murder, Donnie Jones pleaded guilty, and on February 4th, 2013, he's sentenced to life without parole.
I feel he's a monster. There is no reasonable explanation why he did it.
There was a sense of accomplishment that we moved so fast in finding out they killed her. Had we not, as confident that it was real. Detectives do determine Megan's murder was not connected to the Holly Bobo case. There was a thread in the Holly Bobo case that had nothing to do with it.
If Megan had lost her life, I feel very confident that Donnie Jones would still be out trying to trick young women. Megan put him behind bars for life. She sacrificed her life to keep everybody else in our community safe.
Despite getting justice for Megan, the Sharpton family suffers another tragedy just 9 months later in November 2013.
Mom took her life 16 months after Megan's death. Her heart was just incredibly broken, and she made the choice. She wanted to be with Megan.
Yeah, he essentially killed them both. Sure did.
Our family time, that's when I missed her the most. I missed that laugh. If you just heard Meg's laugh, you would be having a much better day. I miss those specific moments, those milestones that she's not going to get to be a part of.
I thought Megan and I would be friends for, on into adulthood. We were supposed to be together forever, as best friends, as sidekicks. She was not someone you could forget. There was a memorial placed on the side of the road where she was found, and it's this beautiful giant star sculpture. It's very cool, and Megan would absolutely love it.